Hi, this is Alan Schimmel, DevOps.com, here at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, London 2016. And I'm happy to be joined by Nigel Kersten, CTO, Puppet Labs, and Mark, I'm going to mess your last name up.
Yeah, Mark Rendell, Marcos Rendell from Accenture.
From Accenture. And guys, welcome.
Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about, but I wanted to start a little bit about the Puppet Lab survey, which, Nigel, you and I have actually spoken about it already. We had over the phone. But I wanted to dive in a little more because there was so much meat there that we didn't really get a chance to dive into. As I was saying, with my security background, I was fascinated by some of the findings in security. And if you could just maybe tell our audience, some of the highlight metrics here that were important, especially in terms of security.
Sure. So two quick little corrections. One, I'm always correcting myself. We're now Puppet, not just Puppet Labs.
Excuse me.
I'm double-checking myself all the time.
It's hard for me. I apologize.
And the other one was I actually moved from CTO to CIO about a year or two ago.
Oh, okay.
And the only reason I'm correcting now is because Deepak, who's one of our senior engineers, moved to CTO role. And so I'd hate to steal Deepak's thunder.
Deepak, we apologize. Okay.
No, the survey.
So
this is the fifth year we've been running it. We partner with IT Revolution and Dora, who sort of are the same people, Jez Humble, Gene Kim, Nicole Forsgren, all of those people. Alana Brown and myself at Puppet have been working on the survey. And I think it's been really fascinating because it wasn't clear this was something people actually wanted 5 years ago. But the fact that we've been running for 5 years means we've managed to build upon this data set and really show the sort of trajectory and progress that this whole sort of movement's made. So I think the really interesting things are we're seeing continuously that the high performers who are adopting DevOps practices are the ones who are recovering from failure faster, they're doing releases faster. But really interestingly this year, as you mentioned, was that we're seeing that they're spending 50% less time remediating security incidents. And that's huge.
Yes, because, and I will tell you why, in my mind anyway, when we talk about remediating security incidents, the skill set required to remediate a security incident is such an expensive and scarce skill set because you need sort of forensic security people, right, who are going to come in and do that type of work. B, they have to work closely with a developer and ops people to go through everything. And then when we talk about remediate, we talk about fix, right? Security guys are good at pointing out what's wrong. And here, now it's your thing to
And they're
fix.
often doing this in a very pressure cooker environment. You're time sensitive, you may be dealing
with
a persistent threat hitting you at that point. I think it's fascinating. One of the things I'm really hoping we dive into next year with the survey is that I think there's a lot more detail to work out here, because I think what we're seeing generally is that as you adopt DevOps practices, more people are involved to the left of the pipeline.
Yes.
So they're involved at the design phase. So one of the things we hear over and over again from people who are adopting tool sets in our area, in the security space, is that they're involved in the design, so they get to move from, rather than just validating production on a checklist, they're actually creating secure designs. They know that there's an automation process pushing all of these things out. So they can design a secure system rather than taking a system and checking whether it's secure.
So we call that built in rather than bolted on.
Yep.
And it's good to be part of rather than a Frankenstein. You know what's fascinating though, and Nigel, you guys have done this with other parts of the survey, and that is sort of the ROI.
Yep.
Right. So it's easy to bandy about 50 times easier to remediate. And we talked about what does that mean from a skill set point of view. It would be really powerful to understand what that means in dollars and cents.
Yep. So we will be definitely seeing something coming out. We're working with the Dora folks around the same data set to see what we can do in terms of producing an ROI calculator. There's always caveats.
Yes.
Services are worth different amounts to businesses. They cost different amounts when they go down. But I think being able to bring this back not just to business value, but to business cost is really, really huge. Because one of the things we hear over and over from the survey is that executives find it really useful because they're like, now we can see how these practices actually map to business value. But we also find that the senior technical folks are like, now I know how to talk to my management.
And bingo. And that's huge.
This huge nexus.
Absolutely. Because I have found in my career, and Marcus, I'm not in your career at Accenture, that one of the biggest disconnects between technical folks and the C-level or the executive level is we talk in different languages, right? I always used to say in security, trying to explain to your CIO what an intrusion detection system is doing, or to a CFO why we need to spend $100,000 for a 10 gigabit intrusion detection system versus the gig. They don't get that.
Well, and I think even worse, and I think this is something the operations community is really trying to resolve with DevOps, is that we almost took pride in not wanting to speak business terminology for a long time. It's like, I'm not credible if I start using those words.
Not only that, I used to, and I don't know if you've heard this, Marcus, where technical people say, I have to dumb it down for the execs.
Absolutely. I mean, it was actually one of the great talks we had yesterday from Gareth Rushgrove was talking about silos and the role of language in that. And everyone has their kind of, he defined a silo as a group of people with some common terminology which unites them but alienates others. So I think it goes in every direction. The business speak needs to be kind of dumbed down for the IT folk as well, probably.
There was a really interesting thing, I don't know if you saw, Elon Musk sent a memo out to everyone in SpaceX going, there will be no more acronyms.
Really?
We keep inventing these acronyms. And
who the heck knows what they are?
Who knows what they mean? It's longer to onboard people. It just makes things opaque.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazing.
Superb. Yeah.
I in previous life, I did a lot of work with the U.S. federal government. And that's acronym city, right? Everything there is an acronym, and you don't know. Literally, as Gareth, I interviewed Gareth yesterday on this. Actually, it's great to help us form a brotherhood, right? When you know what NMCI is, just a collection of letters, but it also is alienating. It's alienating.
And I think it's a shorthand, but perhaps it even starts to lose the meaning. It can take on a new meaning when it becomes the acronym rather than the original intention, potentially.
Absolutely. Interesting, Nigel, you said this is the 5th year of the Puppet Lab survey. This is the 3rd year, Marcus, of the DevOps Enterprise Summit, correct? Just to give our audience, they may or may not know, but when we talk about 5 years, how many responses over the 5 years people?
So I think we're at about 25,000, and it's definitely been sort of ramping up.
Yes.
One of the balances we're always trying to strike is, we're all data-oriented people. We would love it if everyone sat down and spent 4 hours filling out a survey.
Yeah.
And we could draw all sorts of awesome conclusions. But the larger the survey, the fewer people respond. So we're constantly
I've lived that
adjusting
myself. Yeah, I found it's at about 22 questions.
Yep.
You start seeing the.
I think the trajectory we definitely saw, and I think this will speak to the DevOps Enterprise Summit programming, is that in the beginning it was a practitioner movement. This was a grassroots movement. We've seen, people talking about how great it's been to have Patrick Dubois here.
Yes.
All of these people it was very much an operations-centric practitioner grassroots movement. But we saw about 2.5 years into the process, suddenly it was like, we're getting all these managers filling out the survey. We're starting to get all these directors, CIOs, CTOs.
And reading the survey as well, obviously, right? And you know what? That makes an excellent pivot to sort of talk about the event here. Marcus, you're on the programming committee.
Yes, absolutely.
And it must have been extremely difficult there were so many great speakers here, but I've got to imagine a lot of great speakers wound up on the cutting room floor as well.
Unfortunately so. The responses were amazing. And both in terms of, as you mentioned, not just from the IT departments. You've had people from areas of the business, from security, from just a wider spectrum of people that now feel included in the DevOps community. And also more responses in terms of the breadth of industries involved. We are IT is the common factor here, and DevOps is applicable to IT and relevant to everyone taking note. This is not the domain of Silicon Roundabout as we have in London, Silicon Valley, as you guys have. This is big enterprises, and a lot of them are already making some great progress on that journey.
Yeah, what struck me, and I had a chance to speak to just about everyone who spoke yesterday, and have it, as part of my job, I speak to a lot of organizations, undertaking their DevOps journey, is we've moved from, and it struck home here yesterday, we've moved from what I want to call pockets of DevOps at these organizations, right? We had bubbles, if you will, to DevSec, Biz, QA, HR
facilities,
ops, right, where it's almost like the bubbles, when like a child plays with bubbles and the bubbles come together and they get a bigger bubble, and it's that kind of at some of the organizations that are a little further down, right, versus ones who have just started taking baby steps.
Yeah.
We're starting to see that kind of movement. Nigel, you're a visionary, if you don't mind me calling you. What does that portend for the future?
So I think there's a few things. I think one of the really interesting things is this was a practitioner-oriented thing. It sort of grew out of startups and web-scale companies, and people are kind of resistant to adopting this in enterprise environments. But I think we've seen from the survey, we've seen from the summit, and I just, anecdata all over the place, that enterprises are full of so much waste and inefficiency. There's actually more to gain, I think, in a traditional enterprise environment than in a small, already agile, already iterative company.
There's a huge amount to gain. I mean, I think as a movement, DevOps enterprises have become a lot more kind of they're identifying with it. But I think lots of giant enterprises have done fantastic things with industrialization and automation, and they've become giant enterprises. They're extremely successful. What's so exciting is the diversity they're bringing to the DevOps movement, and all of the sharing and the collaboration, and great themes as identified by the Puppet Labs. The Puppet.
It's okay.
The Puppet Survey.
But he is the CIO.
Yeah. It's just fantastic to see how they resonate and how they have resonated in the past with giant enterprises, and how the different constraints, the different scenarios of startups are kind of learning together, and it's very, very reassuring.
I think this really doubles down on Patrick's point that he just made this morning when he was on stage with Gene and Paul, that it's important we don't hit a premature definition of DevOps too early. And Patrick was very focused on this. He was like, I want to explore this space. I want to keep expanding it. Because if we did have this really tight definition that was focused around technology and infrastructure, it would be constraining. And we wouldn't be seeing these security people, HR people. I think one of the most fascinating customers I visited in the last few months was HR had fully adopted Kanban. And
yeah,
it was just
I've heard this story a few times.
And
here.
They were just like, "This is revolutionary for us."
Yeah.
And if you call that DevOps and it causes more people in the organization to adopt it and be behind it, it doesn't matter if there's no server involved.
Exactly. Yeah. So we use internally at DevOps.com. We use Trello, which to me is an electronic Kanban.
Absolutely.
Board. I had a friend of mine who has nothing to do with technology, but they needed sort of a task manager, and I introduced them to Kanban and Trello. I said, look, if you don't want to use Trello, you can use Post-it notes. And this was a revolutionary thing for them. It's organized their entire business now, because as the business was growing, they didn't know how to manage tasks, right? Which, you think about it, it's kind of revolutionary. But let me bring again back to the enterprise, DevOps Enterprise Summit here, in that we see this. I was talking about it with John Willis, actually, just off stage earlier. As the community comes together more, as events like this bring us together more, and the communication lines grow fatter, it also accelerates, right? There's an acceleration of learning, an acceleration of sharing, and like an accelerated evolution.
Which we saw in the survey this year.
Exactly.
We saw that the high performers, when we did the cluster analysis, are actually accelerating ahead of the pack.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few really huge conclusions for enterprises here. One is, if you're not doing this, you're falling further behind. Mm-hmm. But the other is that we're seeing this widespread adoption. We're seeing all these people from all sorts of verticals here at the DevOps Enterprise Summit. So if you're not doing it, your competitors are, and your best people are going to go there, because it's a better way of working at the individual level. And why would you live in this horrible, painful bureaucracy where you don't actually get to see any value created?
And the wonderful thing about the movement is the sharing. I mean, I think Gene called it mutual exothermic.
Mutual exothermic.
Yes, exothermic was the word.
People thinking, but it's not even about. There's so much sharing. It's why not join this movement and share with these. Everyone is trying to help you. You're being left behind by people that are willing to help you.
Right. It's silly to be left behind if they're not.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we've gone a little bit over our 6 minutes.
No problem.
Yeah. Well, we're probably 3 or 4 times that, but that's okay. It'll make for a great video, I'm sure. But Nigel Kersten, CIO of Puppet, Marcus Rendell, Accenture, and Program Committee for DevOps Enterprise Summit here.
Yeah.
Thank you, by the way, for the great job on the Program Committee. And Nigel, thanks for all you do, not just with Puppet, but as part of the community as well. Thank
No
you.
problem. Nice to see you here in London.
Nice to see. Yeah, I'm happy to. This is my third trip here this month, so it's becoming homey. But anyway, thank you both. Thank you for listening. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com.